Have you ever wondered why an avoidant person can seem distant, confusing, and emotionally unavailable, yet still hold deep feelings for someone? One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidant attachment is that they treat everyone the same. In reality, there is often a noticeable difference between how an avoidant treats the person they genuinely love and someone they simply keep around as an option. Their words may be unclear, but their patterns, emotional investment, and behavior tell a much deeper story. In today's discussion, we'll explore 6 powerful signs that reveal the difference between true emotional attachment and mere convenience in the mind of an avoidant. Understanding these distinctions can help you see past mixed signals and recognize what is really happening beneath the surface. Even when an avoidant person pulls away, creates distance, or suddenly disappears for a while, one of the strongest patterns that reveals their deeper emotional truth is that they keep coming back to the person they truly love. This return is not always direct or obvious. It may come in the form of a random message after weeks of silence, a casual check-in, or even indirect ways of staying connected like viewing social media stories or asking mutual friends about you. On the surface, it may look inconsistent, but psychologically, it reflects something very important. They cannot fully detach from the person who has genuinely impacted their emotional world. Avoidant individuals are known for their fear of emotional closeness, which often makes them retreat when feelings become too intense. However, what many people misunderstand is that pulling away does not mean lack of feelings. In fact, the stronger the emotional attachment, the more threatening it can feel to their internal sense of independence. So they distance themselves to regain control, regulate their emotions, and feel safe again. But once that emotional intensity settles, the attachment does not disappear. It remains in the background, unresolved and active. This is why the return pattern becomes so significant. An avoidant will rarely return repeatedly to someone they feel nothing for. When someone is just an option, they may fade out completely or engage only when it is convenient or beneficial. But when it is someone they truly love, there is a pull they cannot fully explain or ignore. Even after convincing themselves they need space, their emotional system eventually brings them back. It is not always about conscious decision-making. It is often an unconscious emotional loop between fear and attachment. These returns are often followed by hesitation. They may act distant even while reconnecting, as if trying to test whether it is safe to re-engage. They may not express their feelings directly, but their actions show they are still emotionally tethered. This cycle of distancing and returning can repeat many times, creating confusion for the other person. Ultimately, what defines this behavior is emotional persistence. An avoidant can walk away physically, but when the connection is deep and real, they rarely stay away completely. Their returns are quiet evidence that, despite their fear and defenses, the person they truly love still holds a powerful place in their emotional world. Another clear difference between how avoidants treat the person they truly love and someone they consider just an option appears in their level of vulnerability. Avoidant individuals are naturally guarded, often building strong emotional walls to protect themselves from feeling overwhelmed, exposed, or dependent. Because of this, they rarely open up easily, even in close relationships. However, when they genuinely love someone, those walls begin to show small cracks in ways they cannot always control or fully understand. With most people, especially those they do not feel deeply attached to, avoidants tend to keep conversations surface level. They may talk about daily life, casual interests, or practical matters, but they avoid discussing fears, insecurities, childhood experiences, or anything that makes them feel emotionally exposed. Even if they engage socially, there is often a noticeable emotional distance. It is not that they have nothing to say. Rather, they unconsciously hold back because they do not feel safe enough to reveal their inner world. However, when it comes to the person they truly love, something subtle but powerful begins to change. They may not suddenly become fully expressive or emotionally open in a traditional sense, but they begin to share pieces of themselves that they normally keep hidden. These moments of vulnerability often come unexpectedly. They might confess a fear they have never spoken about before, admit that they miss you, or reveal emotional struggles they usually deal with alone. These are not constant behaviors, but rare and meaningful glimpses into their inner world. What makes this even more significant is that avoidants do not open up without emotional trust. If they are sharing something personal, it is often because they feel a deep, sometimes unconscious bond with that person. Even if they later retreat or act distant again, those moments of openness remain important indicators of emotional attachment. They may feel uncomfortable after being vulnerable, which can trigger their usual withdrawal, but the fact that they opened up at all is meaningful. With someone they see as just an option, this level of emotional exposure almost never happens. There is no deep sharing, no revealing of hidden fears, and no emotional honesty beyond the surface. The interaction stays controlled, predictable, and safe. But with their true love, avoidants occasionally step outside their comfort zone, even if only briefly, because the emotional connection overrides their usual defenses. In essence, vulnerability is not about how often an avoidant opens up, but about who they are willing to open up to. The person they truly love becomes the rare space where their emotional walls lower, even if just for a moment, revealing a side of them that most people never get to see. Another major difference in how avoidants behave toward their true love versus someone they see as an option lies in where they invest their emotional energy. Avoidant individuals often appear emotionally reserved on the surface, but that does not mean they are incapable of deep investment. In reality, they are highly selective about where their emotional energy goes, because closeness can feel both meaningful and overwhelming to them at the same time. When an avoidant is dealing with someone they do not truly love, their emotional investment tends to stay minimal and inconsistent. They may respond to messages, engage in conversations, or spend time with the person, but there is often a sense of emotional detachment underneath it all. Their attention is easily divided, and they do not feel a strong internal pull to prioritize that connection. If life gets busy or something more convenient comes along, the emotional connection with an option can fade without much internal conflict. There is no deep emotional urgency, no lingering thoughts, and no strong desire to maintain consistent closeness. However, when it comes to someone they truly love, their emotional energy behaves differently, even if they try to hide it. They may not always express affection openly, but internally, that person occupies a significant amount of mental and emotional space. They think about them more often than they admit, replay conversations, and notice small emotional details that others would overlook. Even when they are physically distant or acting avoidant, their attention keeps circling back to that one person. This investment can sometimes appear inconsistent on the outside. An avoidant might withdraw for a period of time, but during that space, their emotional focus is still quietly directed toward the person they care about. They may avoid direct communication, yet still check updates, revisit memories, or feel emotionally affected by changes in that person's life. This internal engagement is what separates true emotional attachment from casual interest. Unlike with an option, where emotional involvement is shallow and easily replaceable, a true emotional bond creates resistance within them. Even when they try to detach, the emotional energy does not fully switch off. It lingers, creating a push and pull dynamic where they move away physically but remain emotionally connected in subtle ways. In simple terms, avoidants do not always show love through constant presence, but through where their emotional energy naturally keeps returning. When someone is truly important to them, that investment becomes deeper, more persistent, and harder to replace, even if they struggle to express it in a stable or traditional way. A very revealing difference in avoidant behavior appears when you observe what they fear losing versus what they can easily detach from. For an avoidant individual, Fear is not always expressed through words or emotional expression, but through subtle behavioral shifts, hesitation, and internal conflict. When it comes to the person they truly love, fear of loss becomes much more active, even if they try to hide it behind distance, silence, or emotional control. With someone they consider an option, there is usually very little emotional fear involved. If the connection fades, changes, or ends, they may feel mild discomfort, but it rarely disrupts their internal emotional balance. They might let the relationship drift without much resistance, and even if there is temporary contact, it is often driven by convenience rather than emotional urgency. There is no deep anxiety about losing that person, because the emotional attachment is not strong enough to trigger their deeper fears of abandonment or emotional dependency. However, when it comes to someone they truly love, the emotional response is very different beneath the surface. Even though avoidants often appear calm or detached on the outside, internally they can experience a quiet but powerful fear of losing that person. This fear does not always show up in direct expressions like pleading or openly asking someone to stay. Instead, it often manifests in indirect behaviors such as reappearing after distance, checking in without explanation, or becoming subtly more attentive after periods of withdrawal. What makes this dynamic complex is that avoidants fear loss at the same time as they fear closeness. This creates an internal conflict where they are emotionally drawn to someone, yet simultaneously overwhelmed by the intensity of that connection. As a result, they may pull away to regain control, but the fear of the person eventually pulls them back in. This fear is also tied to emotional significance. An avoidant does not fear losing just anyone. They fear losing the one who has actually penetrated their emotional defenses. That is why their behavior becomes more inconsistent, but also more emotionally charged when they are attached to someone deeply. Even if they do not express it in words, their actions often reveal hesitation, re-engagement, and difficulty fully letting go. In contrast, with an option, there is emotional neutrality. There is no internal struggle, no lingering anxiety, and no resistance to separation. The connection can end without leaving a deep emotional impact. Ultimately, the presence of fear of loss, especially when it appears in subtle, indirect ways, is one of the strongest indicators that an avoidant truly values someone beyond a surface-level connection. One of the most telling and often overlooked signs of how deeply an avoidant feels about someone is how much they remember about that person's small, everyday details. At first glance, avoidant individuals may seem emotionally distant or uninterested, but memory works differently when genuine emotional attachment is involved. Even if they do not express affection openly or consistently, their mind quietly stores information about the person who truly matters to them. With someone they consider just an option, avoidants tend to be forgetful or indifferent toward small details. They may not remember important dates, preferences, emotional triggers, or personal stories unless they are repeatedly reminded. The connection remains more surface level, so their attention does not naturally lock onto the finer emotional or personal aspects of that individual's life. Conversations may be enjoyable in the moment, but they do not leave a deep emotional imprint that lasts. However, when an avoidant is emotionally attached to someone they truly love, something subtle changes in how they process and retain information. They begin to remember things that seem insignificant on the surface, but are actually deeply personal. They may recall your favorite food without being told twice, remember how you reacted in a specific emotional moment, or bring up something you mentioned casually weeks or even months earlier. These details are not memorized intentionally. They are absorbed naturally because their attention is unconsciously drawn toward that person. This kind of selective memory is a powerful emotional indicator because avoidants are not generally known for being emotionally expressive or attentive in obvious ways. Yet, when love is involved, their mind prioritizes information connected to that person without them even realizing it. It becomes part of their internal emotional landscape, even if they continue to act distant externally. Interestingly, they may not always acknowledge that they remember these details. In some cases, they might casually mention something important about you and not even realize how meaningful it is that they retained it. This happens because their emotional attachment operates beneath their conscious defenses. While they may resist closeness outwardly, their mind is still deeply engaged with the person they care about. In contrast, with someone who is simply an option, there is no emotional urgency to remember or hold on to details. Forgetfulness in that context is not intentional. It simply reflects the lack of deep emotional encoding. Ultimately, memory becomes a quiet but powerful reflection of attachment. When an avoidant consistently remembers the small things about you, it often reveals a level of emotional significance that their behavior may not openly admit, but their mind cannot fully hide. When you observe an avoidant in situations where they are faced with emotional choices, one of the clearest ways to understand who truly matters to them is by watching their actions under pressure. Avoidant individuals often struggle with emotional decision-making because their attachment system is activated in relationships, while their instinct is to protect their independence. This creates a push and pull dynamic that becomes especially visible when they have to choose between someone they deeply care about and someone who is simply convenient or emotionally safer. With an option, their behavior tends to be more relaxed and inconsistent. They may engage when it suits their schedule, mood, or level of comfort, but there is no strong internal urgency driving their decisions. If they are faced with distance or separation from this person, they usually do not experience significant emotional distress. Their actions remain flexible, and they can easily step back without feeling emotionally conflicted. The connection does not hold enough emotional weight to influence their deeper behavioral patterns. However, when a true emotional attachment is involved, their decision-making becomes more complicated and internally conflicted. Even though avoidants may not openly express emotional dependence, their actions begin to reveal hesitation, inconsistency, and repeated re-engagement. When faced with distance from the person they truly love, they may withdraw at first, but eventually their behavior often circles back. They might reach out after silence, initiate indirect contact, or find reasons to stay connected in subtle ways. What makes this particularly significant is that avoidants often try to convince themselves that they are choosing independence over attachment. Yet, when the emotional bond is strong, their actions do not fully align with that internal narrative. Instead of clean separation, there is repetition. Instead of clarity, there is ambivalence. This inconsistency is not random. It reflects the internal struggle between emotional attachment and fear of closeness. When placed in a situation where they must choose, avoidants rarely make dramatic declarations. Instead, their choice is revealed gradually through behavior. They may delay decisions, create distance but not fully detach, or maintain a quiet presence in the life of the person they care about, while emotionally withdrawing from others who matter less. Over time, patterns become clear. The person they consistently return to, think about, and fail to fully disconnect from is usually the one who holds deeper emotional significance. In contrast, options do not trigger this level of internal conflict. There is no emotional resistance, no repeated return, and no lingering attachment shaping their behavior. The absence of struggle is often just as revealing as the presence of it. Ultimately, when everything is stripped down to actions rather than words, an avoidant's true priorities become visible. The one they truly love is rarely the one they can fully walk away from, even when they try.